like to thank everybody for joining us, our first Fireside Chat, TIS National, getting the most out of translation services in aged care. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm running this broadcast here from Whadjuk Noongar land, and I'd like to acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to give a call out to PICAC Alliance friends around the country and to all of you who are participating from all the various regions of Western Australia and beyond. We've had some questions from some of you, and we will try to get some of them answered during the broadcast. The remainder we will have a Q&A session, and we will have that linked to a copy of today's broadcast. We've got about 20 minutes, and in our practice sessions we haven't been able to keep to 20 minutes, so I won't waste any more time and try to get into everything straight away. My name is Ian Thompson. I am the Manager of Partners in Culturally Appropriate Care Western Australia, proudly part of PICAC National Alliance, and our job is to support providers and people working for aged care providers provide high quality care for culturally and linguistically diverse communities. Joining me today is Mary Gagoni, Chair of AFCAS, Association for Culturally Appropriate Care. Mary is an expert in translation and many years in many different areas. She's a bit of a legend in Western Australia for all matters cultural. And today I'm joined also by our resident expert, Rowan Hughes. Rowan is Account Manager, Client Services at Translating and Interpreting Services, TIS National. So thank you very much to the both of you for providing your expertise and for being here today to join us on this.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
No, it's my pleasure, absolutely. The TIS National Interpreting Service operates Australia-wide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with over 2,700 translators and more than 150 languages. It is by all accounts an incredible and amazing service. The challenge is that having so many languages, so many interpreters, we're a highly multicultural nation, and when it comes into aged care, all of those factors of diversity become magnified. So today we're trying to get some tips and tricks about how to deal with the issues faced by the aged care sector, CAL communities and language related issues. Rowan, to you first. Workers in the aged care sector really must know about TIS services, and they need to be confident in using them. In a sector with high staff turnover, they have to know what's available, when it's available, and how to access it. How does TIS National support Australia's aged care providers?
Thanks, Ian, and hello, everybody. So firstly, the Department of Health provides funding for interpreting services through TIS National for a number of programs, including the Commonwealth Home Support Program, residential aged care and home care packages. As a result, these non-government organisations receive funded interpreting services through TIS National, and the use of funded interpreters allows organisations to provide care choices to their non-English speaking clients. TIS National provides a number of services. They are immediate telephone interpreting, pre-booked phone interpreting, on-site interpreting, which is face-to-face interpreting, and video remote interpreting, which is video conferencing. Some people that have not used TIS before think that TIS is difficult to use. However, all it simply requires is a phone call to our national number 131450 and say the language that your client speaks, and an operator will arrange an immediate phone interpreter. The non-English speaker can then talk to the interpreter and yourself in their language. The TIS operator can also arrange a three-way conference call. Please advise the operator to ring your client and provide the phone number. Once you start using the service, you'll quickly become familiar with it. Non-English speakers can access TIS for most government services and some private companies, such as the state and federal government departments, local councils, medical and health practitioners, pharmacies, utility companies, telecommunications companies, emergency services, legal services and real estate agencies. TIS operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and if the non-English speaker calls TIS on 131450 during the times that these agencies are open during their normal operating hours, TIS National can organise a three-way conference call between the non-English speaker, the interpreter and the agency. Back to you, Ian.
Oh, thank you very much, Ron. Yeah, thank you for that comprehensive list of services. And of course, we'll be providing, when we have a copy of this report and the Q&A session, we'll also be having links to TIS services as well as from the TIS website. Now, Mary, through all the work that you've done with, and I must say I've really enjoyed working with you around diversity and communities. TIS is a great service. I don't think anyone has any doubt about that. But do you see that there's opportunities for improvement, particularly with TIS services, aged care and CAL communities?
Thanks for the interesting question, because you're quite right. TIS is an outstanding service, and I've had the pleasure of working in TIS from way back when, and I've really admired the way that TIS services, for example, long before many others did it, was able to use telephone interpreting in emergency situations from so long ago and in such a diversity of languages. So I do think TIS does provide really great service. I think there's always room for improvement. I mean, if there's no room for improvement, it means you're probably 6 foot under. When you're alive, there's always opportunity for improvement. So the area that I think has, from the perspective of aged care, is a real problem is, obviously we talk about staff turnover, but what does that really mean in terms of a TIS service? What it means is that communication is more complicated and has to be far more repetitive in order to get to the right person who needs interpreters and translators and is able to access them in the right way. So to me, the area where we need to do more, and obviously TIS is a leader in this, is to engage with our users more. And in this case, we're talking about aged care providers. Unfortunately, what we found when, we put out a bit of a survey, Western Australia wide, with aged care, and what we found as far as their use of interpreters is concerned, that they weren't even using TIS to the extent where they could use it free of charge. And that is really sad, because we all know that they always claim the issue of cost is an issue. So it's often because they're not aware of what is available to them free of charge. So to me, the communication issue is, if you like, the central piece of TIS services. Of course, there are other things relating to, and I may be totally speaking out of turn here because I haven't worked with TIS in the recent past, but I think the use of technology for, especially Western Australia is a good example. We're half the geographic spread of the country, and we have 1/10 of the population. So clearly one of the problems we have is the distance factor. And one of the problems that we're all aware of with aged care, with aging people, is that often they don't trust a voice coming out of a phone when they can't see the face. Yeah. So the use of technology to give face to the interpreter and anybody else who speaks to them is really great. So I'm not sure the extent to which the walk has been walked down there, and perhaps Rowan can inform us of that. But it certainly is a fantastic piece of a fantastic progress for aged care, is having a screen readily available. That's
a good observation, Mary. One of the things that I've been thinking about is, in the aged care sector, we have a lot of turnover. We all know that. One of the things that when you're new in an organisation, if you've not used something before, you can be reluctant to use it. You probably tend not to use it because you don't know. That's certainly going to be our reality in the aged care sector. So, Rowan, how is TIS National, meeting that challenge of, you've said that the service is simple. What sorts of steps have you got to try to make that a reality for users?
Yes, some of the feedback that we receive from interpreters is we feel that sometimes professionals, not just aged care workers, but professionals in any industry, could do with some tips on the best ways to work with interpreters. Yep. They can provide everyone with some tips on the best ways to work with interpreters. So always speak in the first person and speak directly to the non-English speaking client. Yep. Learn a few polite expressions, a simple hello or good morning in the client's language will go a long way towards improving your relationship and building trust. Yep. Speak slowly, don't shout. Speak in full sentences. If you stop mid-sentence, this may put the information out of context. Don't repeat the same word over and over again. Try alternate ways of explaining something if the non-English speaker doesn't understand. Allow the interpreter to clarify information if necessary. Use clear language, short, simple sentences, but be careful not to patronise your non-English speaking client and pause often. Avoid jargon and slang, as this can cause misinterpretations, and allow interpreters to have short breaks if the assignment is lengthy and or is complex in nature. Thank you, Ian.
No, thank you. Thank you, Ron. Now, Mary, I suppose one of the things that we're experienced in, and I know you and I both from our own personal experiences, is when our oldies, it's not uncommon for people as they age to revert to their native tongue, and certainly the case with my mother-in-law. And it's been very interesting dealing with that situation. Have you had any experiences where that becomes even more tricky with translation services?
So mostly with the interpreting services, it is a big deal in the aged care sector. I'm sure Rowan would be well aware of the problems relating to people who, for whom their native tongue is actually a dialect, which is obviously not part of the NAATI language services as far as quality control is concerned either. So that makes it very complicated. I think, however, it's one of the reasons why, for example, our own association was set up was partly in order to really use community groups and community languages, including dialects, to help bridge that gap between formal interpreting services and building that trust relationship with an elderly person who really finds that the language being spoken to them is not comprehensible, even if it's theoretically their own language, but it's the wrong dialect, So that is, I think, a big deal, and it's certainly one of the factors that has come up over and over again during the COVID time, and I'm sure, Rowan, you'd be aware of that, is that they've found that the use of community is really important in getting the communication to people. That's equally the case all the time for people who are either at the beginning of their dementia or well into dementia, that they really do need community people to communicate to them in a dialect that they can understand. And the Association of Culturally Appropriate Services is part of that service that can help you, link you to the right people if that is required. I think the TIS matching may be an opportunity. I don't really know. Obviously, we know well that NAATI does a fantastic job in that quality control of so many languages in our country. However, to try and add dialects would be perhaps not appropriate at this stage. Because we know the world changes obviously over time, but the dialect information of where people come from and the dialect that that is their own background may be useful information that maybe TIS may be able to use in matching. I don't know, or TIS might be able to do that. But I do think it's worthwhile to use community, but also, look at ways of improving, as we've done, for example, with Aboriginal languages, where we were told, oh, no, it's too hard with Aboriginal languages. And when I was on the board of NAATI, we said, no, we need to do it. Doesn't matter if it's too hard, you still do it, and we're not there yet as far as being perfect, but hey, we've come a long way in the last 10 years,
Yeah, thanks for that, Mary. It really raises a couple of questions. One thing that both of you have mentioned is the requirement for us to establish a trust relationship, because I think one of those issues is if you have a stranger in the room, that can be very disconcerting, and even more so if someone's suffering from dementia. Rowan, do you have any comments that you'd like to make, particularly around that issue of language services and dementia, and any tips for care workers in an environment where they're going to have a lot of people who may be suffering from that?
So firstly, TIS National recruits interpreters who are credentialed by the National Accreditation Authority for Translators and Interpreters. NAATI is the national standards and accreditation body for translators and interpreters in Australia. TIS National aims to have a language list which is consistent with NAATI's language names wherever possible. We also use Ethnologue, Languages of the World, as our primary reference source for information on world languages.
Yep.
Ethnologue is a comprehensive reference publication that catalogues all known living languages. It draws on the expertise of hundreds of linguists and researchers from around the world. Ethnologue is revised regularly to maintain the most accurate, relevant and up-to-date information and statistics in all world languages. Where NAATI offers credentials in the language, TIS National will generally adopt the language name used by NAATI. Where NAATI has not awarded credentials in the language, TIS National will generally adopt the language name stated by Ethnologue. In cases where an Australian government policy mandates a specific language name, then TIS National will adopt this name in our language list.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. So you raised before, Mary, the issue of a client who is suffering from dementia and the difficulty when we had COVID, when people wearing masks couldn't recognise faces. Is there any other tips that you might have for how we can get around that? I know that aged care providers, when they're trying to provide the quality care, they're well rewarded by spending time with the families, getting as much information and background as they can about the older Australian that they're caring for. Do you have any other tips around that?
I think the caring is really a personal thing, isn't it? One of the things that we do with the Association for Culturally Appropriate Services is provide the aged care volunteer visitor scheme, where we match a volunteer visitor in language and culture. And I guess that's one of the unique elements that AFCAS offers, is being very careful in looking at language and culture as equally important to many other factors, such as background interests and all of those things, which everybody takes into consideration with the senior person. And I think it's important, if we're going to try and overcome, some of those differences, we really have to look at it from the point of view of the elderly person. So, for example, what is it that really makes that elderly person tick? So yesterday, for example, I inducted an Indian lady, volunteer visitor, to be able to provide visits to an elderly Indian person in residential care. And when we first entered and the visitor was introduced, she took no interest in her. But I knew that she was interested in an Indian visitor. And I said, oh, did you know that so-and-so, she comes from India? Oh, she said, well, you people go away and you sit here next to me, dear, and talk to me, but basically, immediately, all the other differences of, because at first I thought she saw this young woman, even though, this young woman's a bright and very caring young woman. She's doing a medical degree in the second year of medicine and so on. But the old lady just saw this young woman and thought, who is this, But there was a link around the culture that she came from India and they had lots to talk about. She sat her down next to her and didn't want her to go away and wanted us to all go away so they could talk, you know.
Yeah.
So when you talk about tips, the tips are all around what is important to that elderly person from the particular cultural group. What is it that really makes them tick? And often, one of the problems is that people talk about things that are important in the modern world, which the elderly person may have no awareness of, because, you know, they're obviously in residential care, and even with dementia, that makes it even worse. They may not even be interested anyway.
Yeah.
Whereas what's happened in the past, they probably have a very active and important interest in, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah, so I think the issue around keeping people engaged through putting yourself in the shoes of the person with whom you are speaking is really important. And I don't know why, but for some reason, people don't do that as much when they see someone whose face is old and it also comes from a different culture. For some reason, more barriers come up, whereas we really need to relax, if you like, and say, here's a human being, this is where she comes from, this is what she wants. You know, we don't know this. Okay, let's find out from her family, you know, what's her favourite activity, that sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Mary, I do, and I thank you very much for that. I'm having my offside here with a note saying we're going over time, so I've got to be cracking the whip. I've got. I do know that that there'll be opportunities for more information from this after this in different forum, and we'll make sure that we have those sources and links available for you. I do want to leave the panel with last two questions. So to you, Rowan, this is it's a big question. It's the Dorothy Dixer question. If you had the ability tomorrow to be able to change one thing to improve TIS National, what would you do?
Okay, it's a very difficult question to be able to answer, but what I've actually come up with is some tips for telephone and on-site interpreting, if I can go through those.
Yes, please. Yep.
So some tips for telephone interpreting. Notify the TIS National operator if the call will go beyond 15 minutes or is complex or sensitive in nature. The TIS operator will flag this with the interpreter before they agree to accept the call. Ensure the interpreter is aware if they are on speakerphone. If you are having trouble hearing the interpreter request, that they move to a quieter area or take you off speaker. Brief the interpreter on the main topics you'll be discussing and clearly indicate the end of the conference call to everyone involved. Some tips for on-site interpreting. Allow enough time for the interpretation to take place. The time will be close to double the time of a regular appointment. Organise a private area where the session can take place. Introduce yourself and brief the interpreter on the main topics you'll be discussing. Arrange seating in a triangular form to allow for easy communication between the interpreter and the non-English speaking client. Position yourself so that the non-English speaking client is directly facing you and the interpreter is sitting to the side. Do not leave the interpreter and the non-English speaker alone in the room, as things can get complicated. The best conversations happen when the interpreter and the non-English speaker remain neutral. Be aware of cultural differences, such as the level of appropriate eye contact. For example, not maintaining eye contact can be a sign of respect, and smiling can signal apprehension. And just going back to the earlier question about older Australians living with dementia can find telephone interpreting over the phone challenging. In response to that, agencies have the option to book an on-site interpreter face-to-face. Once the agency has got access to TIS Online, they can log into TIS Online to book an on-site interpreter. As many aged care providers receive funded interpreting services, these agencies have the option to book an on-site interpreter free of charge. There is also the option of using video remote, which is an interpreter via video. However, this would require, if the non-English speaker is not with you, the non-English speaker would need to know how to log into a video conferencing platform for an interpreting session. The video conferencing option is a good outcome for non-English speakers who have limited mobility. If you do not have access to TIS Online to book an interpreter, please contact our service delivery team on 1300 655 820. Back to you, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Certainly something well understood by Western Australians about with the remote services. Thank you very much for that tip. Well, Mary, you've got your tip. One thing you could do to improve the service.
To me, the issue of communication is the focal point because of the issues that we spoke of. I would like communication, including and the things that you were talking about, Rowan, which are really, in a way, almost educating the users. We have an upcoming seminar, we being the Association for Culturally Appropriate Services, on that very issue, because that issue of communication, and communication not just with the migrants, who clearly often are not in the position of power, to be absolutely honest, they're often the client, but much more with the actual providers and the health and medical system that we're often having to interact with in the aged care. I think, to me, communicating with them to use interpreters and translators and not wait until the client is totally distressed because they can't understand a thing of what's going on around them, and they really lose it by that point, and talking about loss of trust.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. I'm sorry to rush you both at this stage. Thank you so much for your time, Rowan and Mary. Thanks very much to everybody who's taken the time to participate in this, the first of our Fireside Chats. The aim is to have information that you can use on the daily basis. The recording of this is going to be posted. We'll send all of you the links for that, and watch out for the PICAC information and newsletters. And we are delighted to be able to host this service today, and hope that it's been of help to all of you. Thank you very much.